Welcome to the University of La Verne Creative Writing Program's Fall 2020 Reading Series. I'm Sean Bernard, the Program Director, and I want to thank everyone for joining us today. It's very kind of you to be here with us. We're doing something special this fall that makes me particularly excited. In the past, our readings have featured current program students, only current program students, but this fall, as you'll see in a moment, we're pairing a current student with one of our program graduates. I feel like creative writing at La Verne is a bit of a family, and it has been for quite some time, and this is a great way for our family to stay connected. So we're excited about this. I'm very excited about this. This is the first of 3 readings we'll be having this fall. Our readers today are Margo Cash and Taylor Croft.
So Margo Cash earned her bachelor's from the University of La Verne in 2012, majoring in art history and minoring in creative writing. She pursued a master's in art business at Claremont Graduate University and completed the program while living in London in 2014. She currently works in admissions and external affairs at CGU and is married to her best friend, Ben, the ULV archivist whom she met at La Verne in an honors course. She also recently adopted a grouchy but adorable senior dog and enjoys finding the best hot chicken spots in LA. Her favorite writers include Lucy Corrin and Ling Ma. And her own creative writing style practice centers around short stories that focus on making small, domestic moments unsettling, weird, and sometimes heartbreaking. Without further ado, here's Margo.
Yay, thanks so much, Taylor, and thanks for everyone who's joining us. I'm going to be reading 2 pieces. The first is an excerpt from a piece that I have. I'll start with it. It's called Blood. These 2 pieces are reworks of some of the things that I submitted for my creative writing thesis at the end of when I graduated. They've been reworked a bit, so I hope you enjoy them. So the first piece is Blood. Prompt. Please write a 5-paragraph essay on the bombing of Pearl Harbor and its effects on American morale. Give examples of the different ways war is detrimental to a country. By Sarah Richards, Professor Jamison, November 13th, 2016. Pearl Harbor. Isn't it funny how blood is blue in veins, then red when it is oxygenated? What a dreary place to be for pathogens. Sometimes I watch my skin slowly. Sometimes I place my pinky finger just on my pulse to make sure. I watch the veins turn green and blue in the light. I watch them splay out up my hands, ending in the lines there. The grooves and creases that will only deepen with age. Red, viscous, over and over again, truly nondescript. Violence that drives people to insanity, a cornerstone of humanity that I am afraid to admit to having felt. It will have blood, they say, blood will have blood. William Shakespeare. July 13th, 1793. Dead in lukewarm water, a sheet, a letter. Beautiful even, but bloody. Tasteful blood, if there is such a thing. It drips down the sheet delicately, his rosy cheeks lift a smile in death. Crimson fingerprints dot the paper and stop the motion. Iron oxide, a great dupe for sepia, or so Castiglia would claim. Coveted, desired, symbolic. Thank you for remembering how much I hate blood. The fake blood and scabs that adorn little children running around for the pagan ritual. The ketchup, the raspberry sauce, the plasticized wounds create an image wholly untrue for a day celebrated for the wrong reason. How much of it do you have left? Dipping 2 fingers into the little pool of blood, sticky and congealed, spreading it over the canvas with hesitance. Feeling blasphemous at first, disgusted, embarrassed, dipping once more and smearing a red face against the white cloth. Lips, eyes, a picture forming of femininity, of what it means to have this blood, to own it, to be blessed with it. Little bags filled with my type O, tubes of it as well. To save someone else, eventually, as I sit and drink orange juice to try and coax my body into making the precious liquid again. The juice is too sour, the pulp wedges between my teeth. I feel dizzy, my body hesitates, arguing with me, as if to say, why did you give me away? I can help so many others, but none can help you. A stain on the bed, on the floor, on the knife where you cut yourself trying to slice cucumbers. Specks of it swallowed when a toothbrush rubs too hard against the gums. A small trail under the nail bed and cuticles. Broken capillaries after the scrape against the cement. I lose it so much it is hard to taste the metal. For a fleeting moment, the iron caresses my tongue and reabsorbs. I have a different constitution. I have a different brain. I have a different heart. I got tiger blood, man. Charlie Sheen. I have to say, the 2 months when I was having a mental breakdown could have been some of the best days of my life. When I see red, I do not want your blood. I do not want revenge. I want everything else about you, so you can leave your blood. It will only get in my way. So that ends that story. The rest of the story shows an outside view of Sarah, who wrote this essay, and how her classmates think she is really weird for turning in something that has nothing to do with Pearl Harbor. And then it follows on one of her other classmates, Annie, who spends her evening alone in her college town and decides to get a tattoo because we find out that she's obsessed with seeing the little drops of blood when she gets tattoos, in the same way that Sarah is obsessed about writing with blood. So thank you for listening to that first excerpt. The second one I'm going to read is a full story, so you will hear the whole thing, and then I will conclude. So this story is one of my favorites, and it's called Nights Like These. It was 1:15 on a Tuesday afternoon, 2 weeks before Christmas, and Caleb's kidneys were failing. He drove home from the doctor's with his right hand clenched around the steering wheel and his left patting his thigh in time to a new Florence and the Machine song on the radio. It was drizzling on the freeway in La Cianata, but he didn't mind it. He liked that he didn't have to worry about watering the backyard today. He parked on the street and stepped out onto the damp pavement. He grabbed his laptop and walked up to the front steps of the house. He let himself dwell in the relief that comes when you have the rest of the day off of work. His roommates were gone. Nick and Dee were a couple, and Dee was his older sister. Nick was in a band that practiced all the time in a garage down the street, and she was a first grade teacher. He had called Dee from the doctor's and told her, but told her to wait to tell Nick. She was quiet on the other end for a long time. He told her Kate would be stopping by and asked them to come home late. He'd had health problems for years, but never this bad. He never needed medicine. Inside, he crumpled the prescription paper and tossed it onto the coffee table. He walked into the kitchen and opened the fridge. The draft of the cold air hit his legs and made him shiver. He reached for a soda at first and then grabbed a beer instead. He knew he shouldn't drink at a time like this because he never drank, but now he figured he deserved it. He sat down on the couch and turned on the TV for some background noise. He thought back to when he and his sister had first moved into the house together, when Nick wasn't yet in the picture. They cooked spaghetti all the time and played Scrabble on the living room floor because they couldn't afford furniture. That was a long time ago. Now he was 30, single, and living with newly engaged roommates. He was also dying, slowly but surely failing from the inside out, and that was no longer deniable. He knew he would get the prescription filled, then stick it in the back of his sock drawer and never swallow a single pill. He didn't believe in medication and never had, so his only choice was to accept it. Kate looked beautiful when Caleb answered the door, and he felt like an ass for making her drive all the way out to his house. But he really didn't care enough to pick her up. He had too much on his mind to think about their relationship status. He was trying to continue the illusion that they were just friends, and she was just naive enough to work at making him like her. She dressed like they were going on a date, in a black dress that dipped low in the front and expensive shoes. Caleb grabbed his jacket, took her hand in his, and led her to his car, trying to be somewhat of a gentleman. His car was better than hers anyway. She drove a basic Honda Civic, and he didn't want to be seen driving around in it. Have a good day? Kate asked as she slipped inside the Audi. Want Italian? He asked, starting the car. She nodded. His lips moved to tell her what happened. He never wanted things to go this far. He always said they were nothing exclusive, but they went out to dinner every week. 4 dates, 1 kiss when she was drunk in a parking lot that they never talked about. As they pulled into the parking lot of a hole-in-the-wall Italian place a few streets over, Caleb blurted out, "Have you ever been sick?" Kate turned to him with that weird look she always gave him, like she was half afraid of him. "I had to get my tonsils out a year ago. I was really sick then." She shrugged, and he wanted to laugh so badly. It filled his chest and made him feel like nothing was wrong with any of his organs, just maybe his heart. He liked the way she could make him laugh so easily. He used to never find anything funny. Her little smile was slightly crooked, and as she played with a loose thread on her dress, she looked even younger. It made him forget he wasn't. She said the gnocchi was cold, but Caleb watched as she picked at it anyway with an awkward smile. He ordered a glass of wine, which surprised her since he had never taken a drink in front of her. He had stopped a month ago after the night he had a couple beers with his friends. The pain was unbearable the next morning. It felt as if his lower back had been drilled into. That was when he first knew something was really wrong. "You make me nervous," he said. "You? Nervous? I've heard stories about you from everyone, and that can't be true," Kate said, but her voice hinged on denial. Her best friend warned her he was a serial dater, that he had weird commitment issues, that no one had changed him yet. "Yes, I am in fact capable of that emotion." "Then maybe I should stop coming around so you don't have to be so nervous that you start to drink. You know how hard it is for me to stay sober." She set her fork down. "It's just 1 glass of wine. I've had kind of a shitty day. It won't be a habit," he said. "Are you sure? Because I can have them bring you out the whole bottle," Kate said, wiping her lips. He picked up his glass, swirled the red wine around for a second, and then took a long sip. Kate sat down on the white couch in front of the TV when they got back from the restaurant. He laid his jacket over the back of the recliner and walked into the kitchen and stared at the oven clock. 8:23. He heard Kate rustling in her purse. He heard the jingle and smacks of her keys against her many keychains. He didn't want her to leave yet. He twisted the dial of the oven around with his fingers. It clicked on and it buzzed comfortingly. It clicked off. 45 minutes later, Caleb and Kate were sprawled out on opposite ends of the white couch. They stared at each other for a long while. The TV flashed colors around the dim room from the basketball game that was on mute. The strap of her dress was falling down her shoulder. She had only kissed him. Only that, but still, he wished she hadn't. "What did you want to be when you were younger?" he asked her. "I wanted to be the Rose Queen in the Rose Parade." She laughed and shook her head from the memory, or at least a princess. "What did you want to be?" "Older." They laughed together for a while until Caleb yawned. "Well, congratulations, old man. You got what you wanted," Kate said. It hurt him more than his back every morning when he woke up. It hurt him more than the thought of being alone. Caleb cringed when Nick and Dee walked into the house with arms full of shopping bags. He knew Dee had done this on purpose, wanting to meet Kate before she would be gone, before he was too far gone to date or even to leave his bed. Dee appraised her with one of those quick, sisterly looks. She motioned for Kate to follow her into the kitchen, and Caleb heard the soft notes of their conversation. Soon he heard them laughing. Nick brought out a box full of bows and wrapping paper and sat down on the carpet with some presents. "Sorry to interrupt your date," Nick said with a guilty half smile as he pulled a piece of tape out of the dispenser. Caleb turned up the volume of the TV and pretended not to notice Kate and Dee walk back into the living room. They sat down with Nick and started to help wrap. Kate's black dress fanned out around her folded legs, and he imagined her sitting on the Queen's float surrounded by flowers on New Year's Day. They talked about nothing. Caleb was silent and only moved to put his feet up onto the coffee table. He only had 2 presents to wrap, one for their mother, one for their father. I have yours at home. I'm sure I'll see you before Christmas. The way Kate's voice raised at the end of the sentence and hopeful questioning made it hard for Caleb to finally look at her. Kate whispered into Nick's ears what she'd bought him. They were already becoming friendly, and days ago, Caleb might have appreciated it. Caleb, your girlfriend is pretty cool, I have to say, Nick smiled, placing a bow on a box. Kate squirmed and pretended to fix the corner of her present. She looked the way he felt inside. Dee shot Caleb a glance that clearly screamed, "Answer her, you ass." "We're going out of town for Christmas," was all he could manage. They stood on the front porch together. Nights like these would be the worst. They held hands and their fingers didn't seem to fit. As they stepped down the 2 concrete stairs, the sprinklers on the front lawn went off. Kate shrieked and ran ahead of Caleb out into the middle of the street. He stayed in the water for a while, watching her as she navigated across the yard in her heels with her hands up in the air, helpless. The water reflected around her from the one working street lamp. It made her hair glow copper and fling around her face in sopping strands. He finally followed her into the street, looking at her smiling like she'd been in some romantic movie. He helped her into the car. He walked back through the water. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for letting me share those with you guys. I'm now going to introduce Taylor, and you'll enjoy her reading. So Taylor Croft is currently an undergraduate at the University of Laverne, majoring in creative writing. She is in her 4th year and final semester, yay, congratulations, and planning to graduate in the winter term. Taylor currently works as a manager at Little Caesars. She has a beautiful veil-tailed betta fish named Sir Reginald, but goes by Reggie for short. Her favorite books are Wind Eye by Brian Evanson, Mr. B. Gone by Clive Barker, and the Witcher series by Andrzej Sapkowski. Her personal creative writing style focuses on short stories that formulate macabre concepts and present the uncanny in a way that a reader can't look away from. So without further ado, Taylor.
Hi, thank you, Margo. Really good reading too, I love that. So I'm gonna start reading with 2 short fiction pieces. The first one was called Cemetery. The graves in the cemetery are breathing, long breaths that ripple between mounds. The waves disappear into the darkness of the winding files of stones erected from the ground. Some tombs are beautiful, some plaques are hysterical. Words carved in by fingernails as if someone wanted to join their beloved into the dirt. Brown, stale flowers wrapped in beige rubber bands lay in front of a few headstones. The stones are a phylum, a breed born from toxic soil. They spread out in an unorthodox pattern to confuse the living and death's pathways. Grass fields grow above the plaques. It's like the fingers of Mother Nature are bitter because she is unable to claim the decomposing within her. The graves are breathing. They breathe gasps of air from a drowning woman. They choke like a 40-year-old smoker. They cha-chung, cha-chung, cha-chung like an iron lung a little girl couldn't take with her into a coffin. There are footsteps behind you that quiet when you look. They are the incessant knock on a tomb that only gets louder with each padlock you snap shut onto the chain of the doors. The plastic fans that pick up speed in the wind add to the ambiance. They carry the whispers deep into the soil. They muffle the screams from within the satin. The flowers I notice most are the plastic ones. In my time working here, I've realized that people don't mean any harm. They just can't stand to see another thing rot in the same place. There's a section that no one takes care of, the forgotten aisle. Tombs sit crooked, toppled pennies buried into the grass. I trace my blind fingers across the letters, hoping to feel what their life was like, hoping to live it for them just once more. I say sorry to those who haven't been visited in a long while, those who've been forgotten by time. I apologize for not knowing what time does to us. She captures us in her grasp and turns us into what we see you as now. Stone that's meant to be somebody. stone that's meant to breathe like a body. Okay, and my second one is called Things Never to Do When Exploring an Abandoned House. Do not enter the house with a reason. Arrive with the intent to find. Never go alone. Never go in groups above 7. Always bring a backup battery for the spare flashlight. Do not bring in a Ouija board. It only mocks the rats. Do not bring music within the house. If you can't hear behind you, you won't find your way out. Do not take down the spiderwebs. They protect the walls from the rats. You may close, but never lock the doors behind you. Never stay beyond midnight. Ignore the man writing notes on the walls. He's mostly not writing about you. Mostly. Never whisper to each other. Never yell. Never look underneath the floorboards, no matter how hollow they seem. Never eat at the family table. Do not call to the rats in their tongue. If you hear a whisper, never respond. If the whispers stop, leave immediately. Always acknowledge that a house may be abandoned, but a home never is. Never lock the doors behind you. Do not dig up the bird cemetery. It's in the corner of the backyard behind the decaying rose bushes. If you must, be careful where you dig. The dirt in your fingernails will never come out. The bones you find will never be reburied. You are allowed to keep any footage for only 1 day. Past that, you might begin to see things within the darkness. This does not pertain to the video. Upon the discovery of a blue ribbon, turn your flashlights off instantly. Do not turn them on until the man's scratching returns to a reasonable pace. If you hear footsteps above you, do not question them. If the man begins to follow you, leave immediately. Never abuse the rats. They are your only defense against the man. The drained jars containing peaches and the uncorked wines in the fridge are meant for the rats. Do not drink them. If you stay the night, sleep in the living room. The bedrooms are, and will always be, occupied. If you choose to stay any longer, ask the rats for a hiding place. The man doesn't mind visitors, but he dislikes new residents. Under no circumstances are you to stop the man from writing his notes. This is his only sanity. Those who do, find out why it's vital to let him keep it. The cigarette smoke you smell is not stuck to the interior, it is alive. It's the house's way of bickering with the man. If you get lost, ask the rats. They know the place best. If you hear tapping from inside the walls, do not reply. The rats only speak in open areas. If the grandfather clock rings at 2, do not explore further. Leave immediately. Never place your ears to the walls. If you listen to those held within, you'll become them. Always listen to the man scratching. If he quickens, you are in danger. If he slows, your friend is in danger. If he stops, he is the danger. Under certain conditions, it is okay to read the man's notes. Just never read the notes about you. Some locks get stuck. Be careful which doors you go through. You will not be able to tell which notes the man writes are about you. Did you lock the door behind you? When you leave the house, say thank you for the shelter. Never return to the same house. The rats never forgive twice. If the doors are locked, do not open them. Never shine the flashlight into the backyard. If the graves move, it is because they, too, are alive. If you feel the need to stay, leave immediately. Only it's too late. The scratching has stopped. All the doors are locked. You never left immediately. Okay. So the last story I'm going to read is a lengthy piece. It was like 18 pages long. So I'm going to only read just about half, the first half. The story is called Return to Sender. Dear Governor Collins, we, the residents from the town of Pine Ridge, ask the governor's office to reinstate the animal control services in an effort to handle our growing roadkill epidemic. The number of deceased animals in our streets is beginning to become alarming. Despite any efforts we've taken to lessen the carnage, the creatures continue to end up dead in our streets. We thought it was important to seek out help from the governor's office. We urge you to assist the removal of the deceased creatures in our roadways. Thank you for your time. Dear Governor Collins, in response to our previous letters being returned to our addresses, our town has decided to send a collective one, signed by our sheriff and stamped by our town hall representative. We urge you to please reinstate services to handle our growing roadkill problem. There have been many car accidents to avoid hitting or running the animals over. Arguments between friends and neighbors dumping into each other's gardens. Our efforts make no difference. They are piling up. The streets are beginning to smell. A waft of putrid rot carries in the air with the breeze. We ask respectfully to please send someone down to Pine Ridge to assess the carnage and to develop a plan to clear out the roadkill. Thank you for your time. Dear Governor Collins, the children in my class at the elementary school cannot sit still due to their growing curiosity of the dead animals. They do not want to learn fractions. They do not want to learn about George Washington. They only sit still when we talk about science. Our chapter this month is on decomposition. Dear Governor Collins, it's been a week since we sent our group letter. I was advised to wait for your response, Governor Collins, but I insist that you reinstate a collection in your agency. Our town's shopping streets have become vacant. Hordes of raccoons and bunnies are clumping up the entrances. Jan threw out all her metallic spoons due to her disdain and the metallic taste in the air. She's refusing to let her son attend school. Please respond. Thank you. Dear Governor Collins, the sheriff and his men began to move the carcasses to the edge of the town. The stench still permeates the distance. The town is now talking about raising money to help fund an independent agency or moving crew, but we aren't confident in our ability to pay the expenses. If you could please, at the least, send money. Any amount will to help us. We will not press further. We need your help in any way you can assist. Thank you. Dear Governor Collins, we've run tests. Committed a day to no vehicles on the streets, roadkill still appeared. We barricaded roads to be sure no tires touched them. Days went by, but the creature still manifested in the dead of the night. We glued our eyes to our windows and hoped to catch the animals, our neighbors, maybe even you, placing the bodies in our yards. Roadkill still piled. They would appear in the moments we blinked. In the moments our children ran to us, tears swelling in their eyes from the nightmares of the roadkill eating them in their sleep. We are plagued. Dear Governor Collins, Joe, our children's soccer coach, has had to cancel practices due to the lack of attendance. We are shut into our homes to avoid the stench. Street sweepers and garbage collectors have discontinued their routes and are saying that you told them to. We don't know what's going on. Please respond to our letters. Thank you. Dear Governor Collins, enclosed inside this envelope is a petition signed by everyone in the town. Our patience is growing thin, Mr. Governor Collins. Stores are shutting early and employees are assisting in shoveling the roadkill to the edges of town. There are several dozens by now. Splotches of blood stain our streets. The sheriff is handing out masks in our schools. Children kick the roadkill into patterns on the sidewalk to play hopscotch. Our tired treads have caked in feathers and feet while we drive with earplugs in an attempt to ignore the endless crunching of the roadkill beneath us. Our letters keep getting returned. Please help us. Dear Governor Collins, a thick shadow is forming in the corners of the town. There are more and more flies with each day passing. House flies, blowflies, yellow flies, black flies. They scream, nuzzling themselves into our exposed ears. When we aren't swatting them out of our houses, they echo outside. The general store is handing out fly swatters to everyone who manages to make their way to their doors. Jan got into a fight with the sheriff as to how many she could take. He said one per person. She wanted them all. We are running out of silence. Dear Governor Collins, I saw one of your speeches on the news the other day. You seem to be keeping up with your plans for re-election next year. I really like your campaign slogan, Collins puts the people first. By now, we'll accept 10th or 15th. Please respond to our letters. Dear Governor Collins, I fight with my neighbor daily. Each morning, I catch him kicking the rotting meat over our fence, rag glued to his face. I confronted him, but he refused to admit it. He told me that I could not prove it. I warned him not to test me. He woke up yesterday with the polka-dotted flesh on his front windows. I woke up today with the cleared lawn. Dear Governor Collins, a small child by the name of Maggie found one alive this morning on her walk to school. She sat in my classroom, talked to my daughter. She said it was a baby raccoon nestled in the arms of its dead mother. Its collapsed lung rattled as it tried to expand its underdeveloped diaphragm, breathing through the blood slowly drowning it. Maggie said it wheezed. She said it was missing an eye. Dear Governor Collins, our elderly are ill from the decay. Our nurses exhausted. Other teachers protest standing in classes where children cannot sit still without vomiting in recycle bins. Our sheriff has been able to maintain a calm and collected manner, but even his men are unraveling. They do not show up in the morning to move the roadkill. The creatures are filling the streets, the alleys, even the park where no car has ever touched the grass fields. We don't know what's going on. We need help. We beg of you. Dear Governor Collins, it's easy to think about leaving by now. Months have passed and you are making us feel hopeless. But every time we pack our cars, we are unable to drive past the town's county line. We are tethered to this place. We are stitched to the fabrics of our streets, of our homes. This was the park that held our family events, our children's games. This is our home, Governor Collins. This is where my daughter was born, where my boy broke his first bone. We are not leaving and we are not stopping. Listen to us. Dear Governor Collins, it's been 4 months now. The edges of our town are now lined completely by roadkill. Our dog population is decreasing. If they aren't roadkill themselves, they are belly up in our yards after eating the rotten meat. The wave of maggots and flies have solidified their infestation within our town. I haven't smelt my child's head in weeks. I cannot breathe without inhaling flies. Our clothes, our food, our gardens reek of the dead. We can't take this anymore. Send someone, please. Dear Governor Collins, Joe told me he was feeling lonely. Our town had to cancel the rest of soccer season because of the accumulating dead in the park. I've invited him over from time to time. He cradles my daughter's stuffed animals whenever she invites him to play with her tea party set. Dear Governor Collins, our tortoises are migrating, or at least should be. They fill the streets nightly, bisected by phantom tires, their necks petrified, craning at anything that resembles safety. Dear Governor Collins, this is the 16th letter I have personally sent. I am building a collection of my own writings. Yellow notices stapled on the front of our red-stained letters boil anger inside of us. We cram them in our stationaries, in our kitchen junk drawers. We are too tired to move the roadkill now. They're stacking in our gutters. Joe thinks we should start burying them. There's a haze of decomposition in the air. Our stores are duct-taped closed from the stench. Our water is brimmed in maggots. We've run out of nose plugs, of Febreze, of Raid. We've run out of cloth that hasn't been dipped in rot to cover our mouths to avoid breathing flies. We can't stop the roadkill from appearing. You can't ignore us forever. Dear Governor Collins, Joe is having trouble walking outside his home. He can't stand the stench. He can't stand the sight. Hundreds of rotting corpses lay in our town. They stack against our general store. They stack against our fences. They killed the park's grass. Joe keeps telling me the animals move in the night. They scratch the sidewalks. Their yellow eyes twinkle like stars too close to our streets. He told me the swelling of their bodies means they're pregnant. I told him they're dead. He asked me who. Dear Governor Collins, Maggie ate a roach last night. My boy saw her poking a swelling raccoon in the throat. The raccoon began to talk, the roaches crawling out in scattered zigzags. Maggie picked up the fattest one, biting off the head, wrapping it in her pink tongue, sucking it like a pacifier. Dear Governor Collins, your van drove through the town the other day. Your face plastered on one side, your slogan on the other. You had shiny grinning teeth and a presidential thumbs up. We all thought you were finally here to help us, finally here to address our letters and our roadkill issues. We flew from our houses to wave at you, to show you our award-winning smiles. The children in my classroom sprawled across the windows, smacking the glass to say hello to you. We welcomed you, open arms. Your van drove away. There 1 minute, past the county line the next. And I'm gonna stop there. So the story continues with the town's sanity just decreasing. It's inferred within the letters that the governor barricades them in with this giant wall that encompasses the entire town. He leaves them with the roadkill issue to deal with on their own. Soon the residents begin to adopt and feel bonded with the roadkill. The children adapt to their new lives, making pets and jewelry out of the dead animals. The character Joe finds an alligator at one point and he just becomes obsessed with it. The sheriff goes insane once the town begins to eat the roadkill. And the narrator of the main letters grows more and more disdainful with the governor, and the story ends with the townfolk using a staircase made of the animal carcasses to climb over the wall, leaving the town to find the governor. And that's it. Thank you for your time.
Those were 2 tremendous readings. Thank you, Margo and Taylor. That was fantastic. Really great job. It's so nice to hear your hear your work, to see you read it. So yeah, thank you for helping kick off this fall reading series. Oh yeah, I gotta put this in gallery view. So what we're gonna do next, I mean, you two know this, but we're gonna have a Q&A. I'm happy to open it up to people who are watching on Facebook. You can post questions in the comment thread there. If you don't have a Facebook account and you really wanna ask Taylor or Margo something, and you know my email address, send me an email, and I'll relay it to Taylor and Margo. But first, they were going to Q&A each other. So I'm going to let Margo and Taylor kick off the discussion. So take it away.
I can go first. Taylor, amazing job. I was able to get a preview before anyone else of these, so I was able to come up with some questions. And I have to say, I'm actually really obsessed with that last story, the Return to Sender story. I love it. So I'll start with that. Why did you decide to do that in letter form? I think it's super effective how it just is like the repetition of letters to the governor. But why did you decide to go with that for the story?
I don't really remember how. I think it just kind of happened. I think the class prior to me writing that, we were talking about epistolary format, or we had like read a story that was epistolary format. So I think I just wanted to try it out, and by luck, my first story that I tried it out really worked with it. So I kind of kept with it, and it really kind of helped the story out.
That's awesome.
Okay, do you want me to just bounce back? I'll ask you something.
Yeah, we can bounce back and forth.
So in your, let me find, I really enjoyed the very odd structure of your first one. It was kind of like supposed to be this essay, and then it wasn't the essay at all. I really liked that. I was just going to ask you, what prompted you to write this in this structure as well?
Yeah, so it was, again, I'm definitely one of the older creative writing grads that you will see on here. So it was coming out of a prompt in one of Sean's classes where we had to try out different formats for what we were writing. And I kind of came up with the character of Sarah first. And then wanted to play around with like an essay format, and then kind of go completely like really confuse the reader at what they were reading. So I wanted to build that in. The rest of the story that I didn't read is in a more narrative format. So I wanted to mix both of those together. So really cool. I think we both had fun playing around with different formats for sure.
Definitely.
So I want to talk a little bit about Cemetery. I think that work is beautiful. The sounds in there, like particularly the like cha-chung, like that I love that. And so it's almost lyrical the way that you write things. Is that something, and I noticed that it's different from Return to Sender, but within Cemetery and then the Abandoned House story, it's very lyrical, the way that you repeat things and kind of the descriptions there. Is that something that you actively try to put into your works? There is this like kind of creepy vibe in all three of them. One's just more like apocalyptic, more modern, and then there's the Abandoned House and the Cemetery. So how has your writing style kind of evolved?
I didn't used to write creepy stuff. Like my first year was kind of just whatever I had an idea of. But it kind of started out with the roadkill story. Was my first like creepy thing that I wrote, and it like blew my mind how much I really loved writing that story. So I kept trying, like through it really cultivated in my poetry class that I had my sophomore year with Angela. I wrote a lot of creepy stuff in there too. So I guess that's where they kind of both developed. I had this lyrical poetry brain and this like horror brain going on at the same time. So maybe that's where it kind of originated. And it just kind of works out for me. It's how I feel most inspired to write. So I'll talk about your Nights Like These. So I really loved this relationship you generated between these four characters. I loved how like they were all in conversation, all very dynamic between each other. I was just going to ask you, what prompted you to write this story through Caleb's point of view versus Kate or any of the other ones?
A great question. So I originally started the story as Kate's point of view because this is a story that, you know, was kind of personal to me when I wrote it. So I identified with Kate more. But I wanted to try a different point of view. I tried briefly writing it through Dee's point of view. It just wasn't working. It wasn't close enough. And so I wanted to explore Caleb's point of view, and kind of his inner workings about feeling sick, but also trying to like have a relationship and being terrible at it. So I ended up settling on him after going through like a couple iterations. But it was fun to like work through that.
It's really cool.
There's questions being posted. I do have one more question for you, Taylor, and then maybe we can move to the other questions. And it's about the abandoned house story. So there's like this kind of back and forth between the rats and the man, who you don't name, and it's really very scary. And this is like the perfect time of year for the story. But the rats, it almost seems to me like the rats are like, they protect the house. They're like, you don't want to make them angry, and you certainly don't want to make the man angry. And kind of what prompted you to write about that kind of between the rats and the man, and then it's about, you know, things that you shouldn't do, which I thought was a really interesting take on the story, instead of like, you know, just going through an abandoned house and you could easily write about all the creepy things. But what inspired making like the man this otherworldly thing, and then the rats like becoming very much a key player in the story and very lifelike?
So I used to watch a lot of like YouTube videos of like people exploring abandoned houses. I always thought it was really crazy, and like the key points that were most intense for them were like seeing animals, or seeing like, or the potential side of like seeing someone in the house. And I thought that those were very tangible things that I could write about. So I thought it was just kind of a creepy thing to write about, basically. And I thought the conversation between the two was a good way to like kind of tie those stories into together as a whole. Does that answer your question? I think so.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we can they see this chat, Sean? Or should I read it out loud? Okay. So I'll read the first one. So it says, it's a question to me. It says, Taylor, when was the roadkill story written? And is it inspired by COVID-19 and the government's response? No, I actually wrote this sophomore year, and when I was rereading it in preparation for this, I was laughing at myself because so much of it sounds like it could be related to right now. But no, it wasn't right in conversation with current 2020. But sure as hell sounds like it.
It's a very 2020 story. Like, I would not be surprised if roadkill started just
showing up,
piling up everywhere. So
yeah,
we'll
still
see what
got a few months
happens.
left, so we'll see.
The other question is, it's so cool that you're both inspired by prompts and forms. Are there other formats that you've explored that you've been excited about or allowed you to write something unexpected? For me, to answer that, I've kind of gone back and forth with like letter form, kind of, you know, in the same way that Taylor did her return to sender. I also kind of like a stream of consciousness, kind of weird, you know, thought form, like exploring that within the characters that I write about, and really going, you know, more into their heads, but definitely more free form, like to make things a little weird and creepy, but more in like domestic settings. I think Taylor has like the whole creepy house and crazy town vibe going. But yeah, so I've experimented with a lot of things, and it's always fun to try something new.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think I've experienced or practiced in a bunch of different forms that I should be. But I do like to mess around with form a lot, and I do like to think that can create a lot. It can make or break a story. So yeah, it always comes out unexpected. Whenever you think of the idea and you write it down, it's always unexpected.
Okay, this is for me, so I will read it. Margo, the first piece you read draws a lot of tension from how it's sort of hiding the story. Can you talk about that sort of approach to writing? Yeah, so that first piece, it was very intentional, that the rest of the story, even if I didn't read it, but this is like what I consider the best part of the work, and it really is hiding the character behind her essay. So really looking at who Sarah is. The rest of the story, she is not introduced at all. People only talk about her. So all she has is her words within this essay. So I wanted to play around with how you could understand the character that I was writing through her choice to do an essay that was absolutely not the essay and basically fail an assignment. So I was intentionally hiding her. And in that, I hope that would bring out more than if I just had a very narrative approach to it and explained who she was and why she had this weird obsession with blood.
The next question that we have is, Taylor, how did you keep your images from crossing the line between creepy and gross? I don't know. I always question that for myself too. Sometimes I do ride that knife's edge, and sometimes I feel like it's okay to go over it, and it's okay to pull it back. Yeah, that cockroach scene with Maggie. Yeah, I think it's okay to go over it a little bit, because it can, like, going over that line, because it can create a very good impact with the readers. But also, I don't want to like avoid people reading my stories, because I don't want them to think, oh, it's too gross, I can't read anything Taylor writes. So it's definitely a line that I always have to keep conscious of. It's always fun to kind of tightrope walk it.
Should always be trying to cross the line. I have a very general question for both of you. We've still got some other ones that I'll be posting. But what could maybe each of you could speak to what has drawn you in the past or still draws you into both reading and writing fiction?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I was a creative writing minor, and it's something that I still write. I still try to keep up that practice. I still am looking at even pursuing like more education and MFA. So it's something that I feel like draws me completely back all the time. And I think it's because I love to read poetry, but particularly I only write short fiction, and I really enjoy reading short fiction. And I'm drawn to that, especially, some writers that are out now. I will say, like, Taylor mentioned it in my bio, but Lucy Corrin is like my number one writer. And I was drawn to it of the way that she and other writers can really have like small scenes, and just like developing a really small scene, like one small moment in time that I think that we all are feeling right now, especially in quarantine. Like, moments are so drawn out. And that has brought me back to writing and making these small moments like really interesting and exploring, what's happening in them. So that's always going to draw me back, is that there's so much to explore. It doesn't have to be like a big sweeping, set of novels, but just a moment that is weird and memorable, and you want to share it with people.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Exploring just like one moment, or exploring just one concept or one interest. For me, I really fell in love with writing and reading in like third grade. I remember like in third grade, I'd always like reading stories like during recess or whatever. And I remember just thinking, yeah, this is just what I'm gonna do. Like that, I'd never had such a sure thought in my life since then. But yeah, I love, it's always drawn to me. I always love and appreciate how people can create just worlds, even like from like little 400-piece stories to like giant concepts and giant 7-book series. I love that people can do that, and I always hope that I can do that too, and have that generate that experience for other people. Has the pandemic inspired either of you with regard to new pieces? Not particularly for me. I'm kind of I'm kind of like over it right now, but I think if I reflect back to it, I might be able to write something. But at the moment, no. I'm kind of just focused on graduating and writing stuff for my graduation.
For me, I have started a few new things, which is exciting. I think it's given a little bit more time for me to try to kind of focus more on my passion. I will say, that right now I'm kind of doing this weird joint like writing thing with my husband, where we have started a quarantine diary, which has turned into like this 160 page typed apocalyptic like terror thing that he's hoping to put in the archives of Laverne one day. So look out for that. But so we're trying to do some things like that and kind of making it weird. And we're like talking in like, we're using a really weird tense and like talking about ourselves like in the third person. And it's just kind of super weird. So that's what we're doing. But yeah, Taylor, do you want to take this next question?
Authorial influences. Oh yeah. Yeah, my family's watching, so my dad's making a bunch of funny comments. I'm drinking water.
Yeah, somebody asked if you guys, I mean, Margo, you mentioned Lucy Corrin, which is funny because somebody who's asking about both of your authorial influences, I think I was like pushing Lucy Corrin on her today, literally. So that's where I'll like double or triple down on Lucy Corrin. Lucy Corrin's amazing. But yeah, maybe you guys could also speak to other authorial influences on your work, either direct or indirect.
I mean,
Yeah.
I will say that, yeah, I mean, I don't want to only say Lucy Corrin because she's not the only one. But I always like to keep up with like what folks are writing in, you know, journals and things. Like all of my classmates and peers from the creative writing program, like I feel like that was just like inspired. I'm inspired by Taylor now. I'm just like constantly inspired by just like everyone that I read, and I try to keep reading all the time. I will say the other author that I mentioned in my bio, Ling Ma, I'm very inspired by her because she wrote this like super weird apocalyptic book called Severance, which is definitely my vibe. And it's like very much an end of the world thing, even though I think that's hard to read right now because we are going through our own like apocalyptic terrible time. But I like that line between a little bit supernatural, but very much like, you know, grounded. So a little bit mystical and very weird and creepy and making things a little sad and depressing. So I'm inspired constantly. Like every week there will be a new person that I'm inspired by.
That's nice. I haven't really gotten much inspiration from authors, but I don't want to say that. But the book I read last year called Wind Eye or Wind Eye is by Brian Evanson. He has a lot of, it's like a short story collection. And it's a lot of like things kind of similar to what I write. And so I really loved a lot of his stories that I read in that book because a lot of them were just kind of like these creepy instances and these creepy narratives. Yeah, so I love reading things that are creepy, I guess, too. And I love writing things that are creepy. And yeah, basically that.
I wish I could pretend that people in the chat were pointing out that your work is a lot like, it's very reminiscent of Edgar Allan Poe, who I know you love after having read him recently.
Yeah, it's great.
No, but you should read more Poe. What we read in class is not the best Poe. So, but yes, it's very nice.
I'll try that out.
The macabre, I mean, macabre, the uncanny, that's like Edgar Allan Poe City. Yeah. I think I want to see if there's any more questions, but I think we have time for one more question, two more questions. I think we kind of covered some, somebody's asking for spooky, creepy season story recommendations. I think Severance is a good one. And I mean, Poe is always great. Sorry to answer for the authors, Guadalupe. But what is here's a question. Both of you can maybe answer this and then we'll wrap it up. We have time for this one. So yeah, what is your approach to character development in your stories?
My approach to character development is that if you are in one of my friends or somewhat in my circle of people I know, I've probably taken parts of you and made them into a character. Yeah, Sean's like freaking out. He's like, am I like Frankenstein? Yeah. So I like to, I pull things from people that I'm around. I also try to explore characters that are very much not perfect and have a lot of flaws. So it's a combination of things, but if you know me and I continue to write, part of you will probably end up somewhere in one of my stories somehow.
My stories are very much more concept driven, how they initially start. So I don't really approach characters until I have like the concept or like what I kind of what I want to write first. And then I guess what I do is I put the character into the situation, or either I do that or I just don't have them at all. And like there's a very quiet narrator throughout the story. So it's always a process for me to put the character into the story and to like figure out how would someone react to like a cemetery or so per se, you know. So yeah, I just put them into the story and see where it goes from there.
I like that. Well, we'll see where it goes from there. Just like we will with the fall fiction reading series, right? I'm always looking for segues on Zoom. It's absurd. But I want to thank everyone again for tuning in. The questions were fantastic and funny, and I want to thank more than anybody Taylor and Margo. Thank you guys for kicking off our new iteration of our ULV Creative Writing Fiction Series. You should both be very proud of yourselves. You're doing amazing work. It was great to hear you read and to hear you talk about fiction. So.